We all.
Is that the QR you wanted up?
Yeah, but not yet. Soon. Let's see, are we streaming? Of course, my dog has decided he needs to be in here with us. Let me make sure we're streaming here. Mike, do you know if your restream started?
I can check.
We are streaming.
Looks like yes.
Wonderful. We got 1 minute. I'm going to go ahead and open the bridge. We're just going to pause that for a second till we're ready to actually get going. We should have attendees start to flow in here any second. There we go. Welcome, Aiden. Welcome, Hunter. Way to be early, guys. Danny, Cliff Calb, hey, my man. Craig Fleischer's out there. Craig, you got one of your contributor tokens got set aside for you today. So think of something good. We'll get started here in just a second. Привет, Rossiyskaya Svet Robotov. Reading the Russian botnets in their native language. Mike, you're going to love this. All right, I'm going dark on this, the main panel, and I'll be, and my mouse just died, of course. We'll close this guy out. I'm going to pop over here and get this party started, everybody. We are ready to go. And here comes, except of course, there we go. Recording in 3, 2, 1. Greetings, everybody, for another Running Into the Fog here with the Joe Bros, Eric and Derek Johnson. Hey, Derek, how are you doing today?
Doing really good today. How you doing, Eric?
I couldn't be better. Slick jean jacket, by the way, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I got my jean jacket. I'm rocking the jean jacket and my First Light Truth magnifier shirt on. I see a pretty cool shirt under your jean jacket, too.
Yeah, well, you know, if I told you where I got this shirt, you'd have to spend the rest of your life in Guantanamo Bay. So we won't go into that. But our guest today, our provocateur today is Mr. Mike Littman, Dr. Mike Littman, excuse me. Mike, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing pretty well.
Fantastic. And we are streaming all over social today. And for those of you who are joining us on social media today, I think, Mike, where are you streaming to again?
I'm streaming on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook.
Fantastic. We're going to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And for those of you joining via social today, I'm going to spotlight this QR code for you all. Scan this, hang on to it, and redeem it. If you don't know what a QR code for a POAP is yet, you're going to learn a little bit about that today. This is an experiment we're starting really as proof of attendance protocol tokens for your NFT collection. This is a specific NFT for the shows that Aurora is doing. This one is our first half NFT for social streaming called Unthinkable. So the first half of the show is kind of a family show. No cussing, as we say. And then in the second half, we cut all you social streamers free. And you got to join the bridge to actually be part of the meeting. And you'll find that on openrecon.com. I'll put a link in the chat here in just 1 second. But scan that QR code. This might be your last chance if you don't do it right now. For those of you on the bridge already, thank you for coming in and letting us know who you are. I'm going to be spotlighting the rest of our panel here. Derek, my co-host. I'm going to be adding Mike in and then me. We need you all in the audience today to put in some remarks and some questions because the format for Unthinkable is we get to spend half an hour talking with Mike and getting Mike exposed and showing you who he is and what he's about and what we know about him, and hopefully learning a few things about Mike ourselves. In the second half, we turn Mike over to you all. And there'll be 3 contributors, and only 3 contributors based upon the remarks that you all put into chat today. So if you put a good remark in there that you want to talk to Mike about, that's how you get selected for Unspeakable. And then you got to join the bridge, obviously. So you social streamers will be saying bye-bye or das vidanya to you all here shortly. But Mike, you and I first met about 2.5 years ago when our friend Jeff Meyer and his wife Amy were doing a workshop at the new Plaster building at Concordia University, Wisconsin in Mequon. And you were kind enough to ask if we were lost and needed help figuring out where we were going. And we got to be fast friends after that, and such good friends that we created quite a rockin' internship program with Concordia, and have since actually hired now formally 3 of your recent graduates, some of your best and brightest to the Aurora team. So Mike, with that intro, thank you for your partnership, your friendship, and your brotherhood here in all of this. And we're so excited to be continuing to recruit out of Concordia going forward and pushing the envelope with you, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a ride.
So tell us about yourself. You're a software entrepreneur. You've got a whole bunch of story that goes along with that. You're obviously an educator, professor, and chairman of the computer science department at Concordia. What else is going on with Mike Littman that maybe we don't know about?
Well, let's see. So I guess I'll try to just hit the highlight reel. I used to play Division I tennis and broke my back. So I'm kind of an athlete trapped in a nerd's body. Put on a couple of pounds after I broke my back as well. I'm an avid golfer. My PhD is in computer science. My specific background is software engineering, language theory. So like creating, writing, programming languages.
Wow.
I started and sold 5 software companies. 4 were in the real estate field. 1 was in mobile application software development. I do consulting on cryptocurrency and VR, and really anything technology. But those are my 2 bread and butter things. Maybe something you didn't know about me is I also have a consulting business around travel hacking. Teaching people, ethical ways of getting cool perks traveling and things like that using technology. Former competitive eater when I was working on my PhD. Let's see. Does that hit the highlights? I think that might hit the highlights.
Right.
Now I'm just a boring professor.
Well, I don't think you're very boring, and we've got a number of your students on actually in the audience here today. So hopefully some of those students have guts enough to come on as a contributor in the second half. Once again, submit your remarks in chat, and we'll select you as a contributor, invite you in for the second half as we get going. Derek, you've met Mike before and had a chance to talk with Mike a little bit. Do you have anything you'd like to sort of take Mike off here as we run into the fog together?
I want to hear more about the competitive eating, but before we go there, this is episode 36 of Running into the Fog, and I just want to make sure that we document that because it's fun to watch that number go up slowly but surely, and it's been a great joy to work on this podcast series with you, Eric. Back to the competitive eating thing, Mike. Tell us more about that. Is that like every summer we see the guy ingest X dozen hot dogs, or was this something different? And I guess an extension of that is have you ever used it in a way that has helped your other ventures in some way or another?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So so it's actually think about like Major League Baseball and stuff. It's the International Federation of Competitive Eating. That is the organization that puts on the Nathan's hot dog thing every July 4th. Within competitive eating, there's 2 tracks. There's speed eaters and distance eaters. The speed eaters are what you see on Nathan's hot dog thing. And if you actually notice, most of those guys, at least the ones that do well, are skinny. Because speed eating is how much you can consume in 8, 10, or 12 minutes. So a lot of that is kind of just the physicality of getting a bunch of food into your body quickly. Whereas the distance eaters, those are all fat guys who just know their way around the dinner table. And so it's how much you can consume in an hour, but nobody eats for an hour. You usually eat for, I don't know, 35 to 45 minutes, something in that ballpark. And nobody really knows how much they can eat compared to other folks. I was always the big eater out of my group of friends. Every single time you go to a place that had some sort of eating challenge, a steak, a burrito, whatever it is, I would just sit down and do it. And I always ordered dessert afterwards, and it was pretty passive for me. And I started entering things and been on TV a bunch of times. And I've done it for several charities, like autism charities and things like that. And then my TV name for that was Awesome Fat. And I actually attached that to my mobile application software development company. So I had which I sold in December 2014. I retained the LLC, but the software company itself left. But the company's name was Awesome Fat. And if you're up in the Milwaukee, Mequon area and you see me driving around, I drive around in a red Tesla that has Awesome Fat logos all over it. And so I guess it's kind of become like this, almost like a superhero personality or something like that. That I
Cool.
guess I play out in my daily life.
I'm old enough to remember that movie. I don't know if anybody else on the line today remembers the famous John Candy, The Great Outdoors movie with the old 96ers. That's what I'm envisioning as a distance eater, maybe sitting down 35, 45 minutes later, you've ingested this old 96er, but maybe that would be sort of a smaller challenge.
Yeah, that would not, the one that a lot of people in the area have seen, like kind of, if I were to say like one of the funnest things I did, I used to do cameos on like Travel Channel and Man vs. Food and stuff. So there was an episode of Big Beef Paradise on Travel Channel where they featured Ward's House of Prime in downtown Milwaukee. And they brought me in as this underdog cameo person. And it's pretty fun to watch. I have some good one-liners in that, but we did 106. There was three of us doing 160 ounces of prime rib. The punchline is, some other guy who was a current competitive eater at the time, he beat me by 4 bites, but then I ordered more from the kitchen because the hour was not up. So it made for some pretty decent TV, I guess.
That's drama, man. I like it. I'd watch that for sure. Super cool.
The other question I have for you as we get started here today is, you're an educator. You're obviously, you talk about being a consultant, but you're also a big portion of your life is dedicated to bringing new software developers up through the ranks. We've benefited from that and have some amazing talent on our team as a result. But my question for you is, how do you mode switch between the two? You're a consultant on the one hand, and then you're an educator, mentor who is really seeking to place your students, obviously, with good companies of all sizes. And you have to, I would imagine, use different muscle twitch and fibers and different things like that of your being to get yourself from one place to the next. I don't know if you can comment on that from that perspective.
So I'd actually say it's all the part of the same thing. I started teaching college in 2000. So I've been teaching for 22 years. So I was running companies in the middle there. And I think part of it is kind of this entrepreneurial spirit where what I would do is when I was teaching, I mostly taught software development classes, is I would hire my students as interns for my companies. And I effectively had a 3 or 4 year interview process with these students where I could cherry pick the good ones after that and, write letters of recommendation for the other ones. So it really ended up becoming almost like a manufacturing type of situation where I was, not only was I educating people, I was specifically educating my own employees. And so I guess, because of that, I think I already had a passion for teaching, and I think computer programming is kind of difficult to teach. And I guess I'd like to think I have a fairly unique way of teaching it that people tend to benefit from, I guess. but maybe I was even more motivated to ramp the very best, brightest students up more quickly because I had a vested interest in them becoming productivity units earlier on. So I guess I never really look at it as it never really feels like it's a mode switch. I feel like I'm, a hyper analytical person all the time. So, I guess that's the way I think 100% of the time.
Tell us more about that way you teach programming that's unique. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so one thing you hear from folks when you run into them and they find out you're a software developer or something, like, oh, they say, oh, what language? And I teach computer programming from the perspective that the language does not matter. Computer programming is the skill set. You can then take that language, take that skill set, and go and learn any other programming language in like a weekend. Because the way human beings, I kind of abstract it down to how do human beings solve problems? We remember stuff, we ask a lot of questions, and we do repetition. And then I'll say 100% of programming languages, literally 100% of them, will have facilities for those three things. So if you can answer that question with a language that was just introduced to you this morning, is how do I remember things? How do I ask a question? And how do I do stuff repeatedly or give? So effectively, it's how do I remember things? Those are variables in most programming languages. How do I ask questions? Usually that's conditionals, if statements. How do I do things repetitions? That's loops, functions, procedures, things like that. So if you could sit down with a brand new programming language and learn how to do those three things, just what's the weird syntax for this particular language to do those three things, you could already solve a huge subset of the problems that you might be capable of solving in that language in half a day. And then by using the language, you just bring in, every programming language kind of has its little idiosyncrasies, and some kind of lend themselves to solving certain kinds of problems. So you start bumping into some of the built-in stuff in that language that maybe, makes it the reason to pick that language for a certain type of thing. But to learn another programming language really is not an overly difficult thing. And one thing I like to connect it to with some of my students who maybe they don't have any background in computer programming, but they have a background and maybe they speak a second language. And the common second language they might have learned, and you have international students and it's their language from their homeland. But if it's students who maybe took a language in high school, like Spanish or French or something like that, I would say something like, when you're speaking to your Spanish speaking friends, your mindset does not change from when you're speaking to your English speaking friends. Different words are coming out of your mouth, but your mindset doesn't change. And why is that? Because you're speaking to a human being. And we have a whole lifetime of experience of talking to people. Same thing's true with programming languages. Even though we're using different syntax, we're typing out a couple different things to say basically the same stuff in different programming languages. Ultimately, we're talking to a computer. That's the skill set. How do we leverage our human problem solving and really dumb it down? Because really the problem is a lot of folks perceive computer programming as being hard. I would actually go the other direction. I would say that human beings are such good problem solvers that we have trouble articulating how we solve problems. Even something like just, walking down the street or something like that, you're in a mall, or I see them in the hallways at the school, the students are sitting there staring at their phone, texting while they're bobbing and weaving around people. It's not even worth their time to pay attention to how they're walking and think about all the little muscle twitches, all these things that are happening that we could never fully articulate how we accomplish some of these tasks. Yet it's so mindless for us that we can text while we're doing it. So human beings are just amazing problem solvers. And the problem for us is when we go and have to tell a computer what to do, we have to break the steps down into little tiny granular steps. That's what's challenging for us to do, because we are too good at solving problems otherwise, where we don't have to think about all those 50 steps in between.
So that breaking down process is literally the definition of analysis. Analysis is the breakdown of a problem into its constituent subproblems, and synthesis is then the pulling together of those things into a bigger whole. And so it strikes me that, analysts in our world, the intelligence analyst world, have a heck of a lot in common with software engineers from the analytical standpoint, breaking things apart into smaller pieces that are a little more bite-sized and, chewable, so to speak, not to extend the competitive eating metaphor too far.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, and really that just comes down to human beings are great problem solvers across the board. And we apply that problem solving ability to all sorts of different vocations. Computer scientists are having to tell a computer what to do. Analysts, let's even just talk about it in terms of computer analysts. They are one layer up and they have to bridge the gap between the computer nerds and the human beings. The business people. How do they interpret this data and explain it to somebody else as, look, this is all complicated stuff. This is what we've done to it. This is what we've learned from it. And this is how you can now go and use that. Here's your marching orders, something like that. But the problem solving process for that is still the same, because the way people solve problems is the way people solve problems, period. We just have to think about who our audience is. Who are we trying to explain the solution to?
Perfect.
I remember being I think I was either a freshman or sophomore at UW Eau Claire way back in the day. This would have been the 93, 94 timeframe. And at that time, we didn't have email, you had to, I forget, I think it was a dial up through Netscape, if I have that correct, but I'm a self-described tech Luddite. And, so when you think about where we've come in the last 25 years, in way of technology for communication and all that goes into that. Chad's correcting me. Thank you, Chad, in the chat, Eudora, up at UWC. I see this thing over your head, Mike, VR, virtual reality, right? And I'm saying to myself, and this is a two-part question, one of which I'm going to ask you now, and the next part I'm going to save for the unspeakable part of our time together. What do you think college students are going to be doing in another 20 years that they aren't doing today, made possible through things like VR or other augmented or mixed reality sorts of environments? Can you comment on that from the standpoint of your student of today in comparison to or anticipation of your student of 2 decades from now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think today we have a kind of an interesting disconnect. When I started teaching 22 years ago, the students were coming in with, school was their full-time job. I wouldn't hear from these students that, oh, I couldn't do homework. I had I had a double shift this weekend or something like that. Some of them had part-time jobs and things like that, but now students are coming to school, they have credit card debt, they have car payments, kind of real life, I think, is starting a lot sooner today. So now from an academics perspective, I can say that, oh, well, the best way to learn is to be physically present in the classroom. And, your full-time job for your 4 years in college is to be a student. Your full-time work is your homework. That's what you should be doing, because that's how you're becoming an expert at something or whatever. Now, I can say that that's the ideal, but that's not necessarily compatible with today's customer, today's student. Our people today are much more worldly. They know a lot more about what's going on, and they get involved in a lot more things, whether it's in the digital world or the physical world. So I think we're seeing, and this was kind of I think exasperated with COVID, is that more and more people appreciate the convenience of going online. They appreciate, even if it's not as good of a learning environment. It's pretty, you can always tell at the end of a class, when I do a class that happens to be on Zoom, you can see, you got those 4 or 5 students that are still sitting there at the end of class after class has been dismissed. You're pretty sure that they're the ones who logged on and walked away or something like that. Or every now and then you'll hear somebody, their mic will get unmuted or something. You hear the Netflix going on in the background, that kind of stuff. So we have, as human beings, we have this perception that we want one thing, even if it's not what's necessarily best for us, but we tend to be, I guess, critters of convenience. So with that in mind, I think that technology is going to be something that we're going to be leveraging more and more and more moving forward, not just in education, but also in industry. I mean, you're already seeing companies reduce their real estate footprint since, everybody went remote during COVID. A lot of companies said, hey, maybe you don't have to come back. This worked out okay. And again, it takes a certain kind of employee for that, somebody who's going to, be, ethical and things like that, rather than just, phone in their hours. But, the point is that you're going to start seeing that become more and more the norm. So now we have to look at how can technology facilitate some of that oversight that we do lose. When somebody is on Zoom, like right now, we don't know who's sitting there, typing out emails or whatever. Half the people have their cameras off and that kind of stuff. That's just the common, Zoom etiquette, let's say. Where if you do like a VR meeting and, we do these all the time, everybody has to put this headset on. So you physically have to wear a headset. And your avatar is in this room and you can tell who you're looking at, when somebody's talking, if you're just staring into oblivion, then people kind of know that you probably put your headset on a mannequin or something, or when your headset, when your head goes down on the screen, that probably means you took the headset off and, you ran off into the other room or something. But it adds a sense of presence because you actually make eye contact with the person who's talking, and it's much, much, much more like actually being there. And people, I feel like, are a lot more accountable for their attention, even though they're still completely remote. So you're going to start seeing that become much more of the norm, rather than people spending a lot of money or time traveling. This comes down to how do we, burn fossil fuels and all sorts of stuff like that. If you have to take one less airplane trip per year, you're doing, some reasonable good for the environment, let's say. Then for that, after that, you have 1,000 more arguments along those similar lines with time and money and all sorts of stuff using technology, similar to travel. There's already people who are live streaming like tours of Rome, for example, where you can put on a headset and you're effectively, riding on this person's head as they're walking through Rome. And you can talk to them and, live and say, hey, go over there to the left and let's look at that farmer's market or something like that. And you can look all around as if you're there. I think we're going to probably see, as we now you're starting to see the merger between, let's say, keep it with VR and maybe robotics. So what keeps us from having effectively a station of robots that can walk around and all this stuff, over in, let's just keep using Rome as our example. And I pop my headset on here in Mequon, Wisconsin, and, I take over my robot in Rome and I'm just wandering around town as if I'm there. And as we get more and more technology where we can kind of, fake the smells and all that stuff, and we have, I don't know if you've ever been to one of those 4D movie theaters where they have like the wind blowing and the sheets, the seats shake and all this stuff. We're going to start augmenting our overall experience with things like that. Well, now you start saying, well, do people ever need to leave the house? Kind of interesting. And that I'm a big fan of that Ready Player One book. The movie was good too, but the book was excellent. And it kind of paints that picture of what happens if everybody is living in VR, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of positives to it, but there's some things that we do need to think about, is what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to interact with other people physically? Stuff like that. So I don't know. It could be good and bad, I suppose.
Right on. By the way, just a quick interjection. You'll see on your screen that QR code to scan for the PO app. Please go ahead and get that. And claim it, or at least reserve it. If you don't have a crypto wallet yet, you can reserve it with your email address. By the way, we have our first contributor has been named. Suki Fuller will be joining us as a contributor in about 2.5 minutes when we say goodbye to the social anonymous streamers. Convert over at openrecon.com/events/RITF-livestream. I'm going to put that into the chat here in a second. But we've got about 2 minutes. Derek, one last question for Mike regarding sort of what he looks for in terms of an intern recommendation. And the reason I asked that is I asked you a few weeks ago to recommend some interns for our summer program, which is called the Dark Acolyte program, by the way. We've got a new program that started up called the Dark Architects. And the first few of those Dark Architects are being called the Dark Acolytes. So welcome everybody from that program who's joining the bridge today. Feel free to join as a contributor in the second half if you have something interesting to talk to Professor Littman about. And even if it's just to ask for a better grade, that's fair game, I would say. But tell us in this next couple of minutes before we cut the unthinkable folks free, what do you look for when you make a recommendation like that? What kind of student are you cherry picking to send our way?
Okay, well, so that's situational. You know, I have some personal relationships with some companies, you know, where, you know, at the end of the day, I have a significant amount of influence over who gets hired. And with that in mind, there's a reputation there to maintain to make sure I'm sending them people that are going to deliver. So when I'm working with you guys or places like Acuity, you know, we have 3 or 4 other companies that, you know, we've historically been close with and fed them people, and they're asking me for a recommendation. I'm going to go and look at who are my best students. Now, best students come in a lot of different flavors. So you have people who maybe are very talented that maybe need some real world experience to maybe smooth out the rough edges. So sometimes that's it. Sometimes you have really dedicated students that you know have a lot of potential, and if they're given and you know, if they're given an opportunity to do something, you just know that they're gonna bloom. They're gonna be something special, and you just see that potential in them right from the get-go. You know, so that's kind of like the example with the 3 guys I sent you recently. Is, you know, these are second semester computer programming students, so you know they don't know what they don't know yet, but all 3 of them are people that have just tons of potential. And I'm 100% positive that with real life experience, they're going to turn into effectively professional developers, you know, during their sophomore year of college. You know, so I look for those kind of things, and maybe that's part of, you know, talent identification. Maybe it's a talent I have or something, or maybe just from 22 years of working with student programmers. You know, I have gotten used to identifying, you know, who's good and who sucks, you know, something like that. But now also working with some other, you know, companies, I might pick a student who struggles more because that is a good fit for what that company needs. Maybe they don't need somebody who's going to be as skilled, but they really have a heart for bringing people in and kind of investing their time and maybe money into, you know, giving somebody some experience they're not going to get in the classroom. So I think everybody is employable when they're in school, but you kind of have to direct them to the place where, you know, maybe God wants to see them and where they're going to shine the most. And that's not always at, you know, the top tier places.
Well said, Mike. And just for those of you watching on social, go ahead and follow Mike on Awesome Fat on Twitch, Mike Littman on Facebook, Mike Littman on YouTube. We're streaming in a few places, and join us on the bridge if you like. openrecon.com/events/RITF-livestream. We need to shorten that URL, I think, Derek. Register there, and then you can join the regular bridge. Otherwise, das vidanya, live streamers. We will see you on the flip side. And we have our first contributor joining us, Suki Fuller, our good friend Suki Fuller, who taught me how to spell NFT about a year ago. Welcome